I never thought I'd be the kind of man who'd spy on his own wife. But then again, I never thought I'd find myself choosing between the woman I'd loved for 42 years and the father who raised me to be the man I am. This is about my father, Edward Mitchell, a proud Marine Corps veteran who survived 2 tours in Vietnam but couldn't survive what was happening under my own roof. And this is about my wife, Sophia, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone in this world. My name is James Mitchell. I'm 63 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had it all figured out. Sophia and I had built a good life together in our townhouse just outside Portland. We never had children. It wasn't by choice at first, but as the years went by, we made peace with it. Or at least I thought we had. We traveled, we invested in our careers, we enjoyed our freedom. I worked as a financial consultant, and Sophia had done well for herself in pharmaceutical sales. We were comfortable, we were happy, or so I believed. Everything changed last April when I got the call from my father's doctor. Dad had been living independently in his small apartment across town, still driving, still doing his grocery shopping, still insisting he didn't need help from anyone. He was 72, proud as ever, and had always been the kind of man who'd rather suffer in silence than be a burden. The doctor's words were clinical, but the message was clear. Early-stage Parkinson's disease. He'd need help with medication management, mobility support, and daily activities. He couldn't live alone anymore. I didn't hesitate. Dad had sacrificed everything for our family. After Mom passed away 15 years ago, he'd poured all his energy into making sure I had every opportunity in life. Now it was my turn. I sat Sophia down that evening in our kitchen, the sunset casting orange light through the windows, and I told her. I expected resistance. We talked about this possibility before, always in abstract terms, always with Sophia saying things like, "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it." But I'd never seen the look that crossed her face that night. Something flickered in her eyes, something cold. But it passed so quickly I convinced myself I'd imagined it. "Of course," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Of course he'll come stay with us. He's family, James. We'll make it work." I remember feeling such relief, such gratitude. I pulled her into a hug right there in the kitchen and thanked her. She smiled, but I didn't see that smile. I was too focused on my own relief to notice it didn't reach her eyes. Dad moved in 3 weeks later. We converted the guest room on the first floor into his bedroom, put grab bars in the bathroom, set up a medication organizer with all his prescriptions. The first week was an adjustment for all of us. Dad was quiet, almost apologetic about being there. He'd thank us for every meal, every small thing we did. Sophia played her part perfectly. She'd bring him tea in the afternoon, ask about his day, make conversation about his time in the Marines. If I'd been paying closer attention, I might have noticed how stiff those interactions were, how Dad's responses were polite but brief, how he never quite relaxed around her. But I was busy. Work had gotten demanding with several new clients, and I was also handling Dad's medical appointments, insurance paperwork, and coordinating with his doctors. I was running on autopilot, grateful that Sophia seemed to be handling things at home. The first crack in the facade came about 3 weeks in. It was a Tuesday night. I woke up around 2:30 in the morning, needing to use the bathroom. As I walked down the hallway, I heard voices, raised voices. I stopped, trying to place where they were coming from. Dad's room. I moved closer, pressed my ear to the door. Sophia's voice, sharp and irritated, though I couldn't make out the words. Then silence. I stood there for a full minute, but heard nothing more. When I finally opened the door and looked in, Dad was in bed, eyes closed. Sophia was nowhere to be seen. I found her in our bedroom, already in bed, apparently asleep. The next morning, I asked Dad if everything was okay. He looked at me with those steady blue eyes that had always been able to see right through me, and he said, "Everything's fine, son." But something in his voice felt off. When I asked if he'd been awake in the night, he shook his head. "Slept through," he said. I wanted to push, but I didn't. I told myself I'd been dreaming, or maybe it had been the TV from a neighbor's unit. But then it happened again. A week later, same time, around 2 or 3 in the morning. This time, I was certain. I heard Sophia's footsteps in the hallway, heard Dad's door open and close. I lay there in the dark, my heart pounding, telling myself there was a reasonable explanation. Maybe Dad had called for help. Maybe he'd been sick. I waited, and about 15 minutes later, I heard Sophia return to our room. She slipped back into bed beside me, and I pretended to be asleep. In the morning, I asked her about it directly. Did Dad need something last night? She looked up from her coffee, and for just a second, I saw something flash across her face. Annoyance? Fear? But then she smiled. What do you mean? I thought I heard you go into his room. Oh, she said, waving her hand dismissively. Yes, I heard him coughing. Just wanted to make sure he was okay. Brought him some water. You know how it is. I nodded. It made sense. She was being caring, attentive, everything a daughter-in-law should be. So why did I feel uneasy? Over the next 2 weeks, I started noticing other things. Small things. Dad had always been a talker. Loved sharing stories from his military days, his childhood, his adventures with Mom. But now he was quiet, withdrawn. He'd sit in the living room with us in the evenings, but he seemed to shrink into himself. When I'd ask him questions, his answers were short. He stopped making eye contact with Sophia entirely. One Saturday afternoon, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner. Dad came in using his walker, moving slowly but steadily. He stood there for a moment, watching me chop vegetables. That look on his face, the one I remembered from childhood when he had something difficult to say but didn't know how to start. Something on your mind, Dad? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. He cleared his throat. James, can I ask you something? Anything. There was a long pause. Then, does she mind having me here? I put down the knife and turned to face him. What? No, of course not. Why would you ask that? He shrugged, but wouldn't meet my eyes. Just a feeling. Don't want to be a burden on you two. Dad, you're not a burden. You could never be a burden. Sophia's fine. We're both happy to have you here. He nodded slowly, but I could see he didn't believe me. If you say so. Has something happened? Has Sophia said something to upset you? No, he said quickly. Too quickly. Nothing like that. Just, I'm an old man. Sometimes I get ideas in my head. I wanted to push further, but Sophia walked into the kitchen at that moment, and Dad immediately went quiet. She smiled at both of us. What are you two talking about? Just discussing what vegetables Dad prefers? I lied, and I watched my father nod along with that lie. Watched him retreat back into silence. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to Sophia, listening to her breathing, and I thought about my father's question. Thought about those nighttime visits to his room. Thought about how he'd changed since moving in. In the darkness, I promised myself I'd pay more attention. I'd make sure everything was truly okay. The next week, I started checking Dad's medication organizer more carefully. He had 7 different prescriptions he needed to take at specific times, Monday through Sunday, morning and evening doses, all color-coded and labeled. I'd been the one to set it up initially, but Sophia had taken over the daily management. On Wednesday morning, I noticed something odd. Tuesday evening's dose was still in the organizer. The pills were sitting right there, untouched. I found Dad in his room, sitting in his recliner by the window. Dad, did you take your evening meds last night? He looked confused. Sophia brought them to me. Didn't I? These are still here. I showed him the organizer. He stared at the pills, his forehead creasing. I could have sworn, maybe I'm losing it. It's okay, I said, though my chest felt tight. Let me get you some water, and you can take them now. I made a mental note to watch the medication situation more closely. Maybe Dad was forgetting to take them. Maybe Sophia was forgetting to give them. Or maybe something inside me whispered. Maybe something else was happening. That Friday changed everything. I came home early from work, around 4 in the afternoon. I'd had a client meeting cancel and decided to surprise Sophia, maybe take her out to dinner. When I walked in, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I called out but got no answer. Sophia's car was in the driveway, so I knew she was home. I walked through the house and found Dad's door closed. unusual for the middle of the afternoon. I knocked softly, then opened it. Dad was on the floor beside his bed, his walker tipped over next to him. He was trying to push himself up, his arms shaking with effort. "Dad!" I rushed in, helped him into a sitting position. "What happened? Are you hurt?" I'm fine," he muttered. But he wasn't fine. I could see a fresh bruise already forming on his left forearm, dark purple against his pale skin. There was another on his shoulder when his sleeve shifted. "How did you fall? Where's Sophia?" "I don't know. I was trying to get to the bathroom. Lost my balance." I helped him back into bed, checked him over for other injuries. The bruises looked painful, but nothing seemed broken. "I'm calling your doctor." "No need, son. I've had worse. Just bumps and bruises." But something felt wrong. The way he wouldn't meet my eyes, the tremor in his voice that had nothing to do with Parkinson's. I left him to rest and went to find Sophia. She was in our bedroom, reading a book, looking completely relaxed. "Dad fell," I said from the doorway. "He's got bruises all over his arm." She looked up, concern flooding her face. So convincing. "Oh no, is he okay? I was just up here for 20 minutes. I should have checked on him." He said he was trying to get to the bathroom. Poor thing. The Parkinson's is making him so unsteady. "Maybe we need to look into a care facility, James. This is getting dangerous." Something about the way she said it made my blood run cold. This is getting dangerous. As if Dad was the problem. As if the solution was to send him away. "He's staying here," I said, more firmly than I'd intended. "We just need to be more vigilant." That night, I sat with Dad for a long time. Brought him dinner on a tray, watched TV with him. He seemed calmer with just the two of us. Around 9, I asked him directly, "Dad, I need you to tell me the truth. Did you fall, or did something else happen?" The silence stretched between us. I watched him struggle with something, his jaw working, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. "I fell," he finally said, but he still wouldn't look at me. "Dad." "James, just leave it alone. I'm fine." I wanted to push, but I could see I was only causing him stress. So I dropped it, but I didn't forget it. Over the weekend, I couldn't stop thinking about those bruises, about the missed medications, about the nighttime visits, about how Dad had changed. On Sunday night, after Sophia had gone to bed, I made a decision. I went online and ordered a small camera, the kind that looks like a digital alarm clock. Basic, simple, but with a motion-activated recording feature. It would arrive in 2 days. Those 2 days felt like 2 years. I watched Sophia interact with Dad, looking for something, anything that would confirm or deny my growing suspicions. She was perfect, attentive, kind, bringing him tea, asking about his comfort, adjusting his pillows, and every time, I'd see Dad tense slightly, see him offer a polite thank you that sounded hollow. The camera arrived on Tuesday. I set it up in Dad's room that afternoon while Sophia was out running errands, placing it on his nightstand where it had a clear view of most of the room. I showed Dad how it worked, told him it was just so we could check on him if we were worried, make sure he was safe. He looked at the clock for a long time, then at me. "You think something's wrong, don't you?" he asked quietly. "I think I want to make sure you're safe, Dad. That's all." He nodded slowly. "Okay, son. Okay." That night, I barely slept. I lay awake, listening, waiting. Around 2:15, I heard it. Sophia getting out of bed, her footsteps in the hallway, Dad's door opening. I forced myself to stay still, to not move, even though everything in me wanted to rush out there and see what was happening. 15 minutes later, she came back, slipped into bed. Her breathing evened out into sleep while I lay there, my heart hammering against my ribs. The next morning, I waited until Sophia left for a work appointment. Then I went to Dad's room. He was sitting in his chair, staring at nothing. "We need to check the camera," I said. He just nodded. I pulled up the footage on my phone, connected to the camera's app, fast-forwarded through the evening hours. There, at 2:17 a.m., the door opening, Sophia entering, and in the dim glow of the nightlight, I could see my father in bed, awake, watching her approach. What happened next took less than 3 minutes. But those 3 minutes Destroyed 42 years of my life. Sophia walked to the side of Dad's bed. I turned up the volume on my phone. Could hear their voices clearly. "Did you take your pills tonight, Edward?" Her voice was cold. Nothing like the warm tone she used during the day. Sophia brought them. Dad's voice. Quiet. Uncertain. "That's not what I asked. Did you actually swallow them?" A pause. I can't remember." "Of course you can't. You can't remember anything anymore, can you?" Just another confused old man. I watched, my hands shaking, as she reached down and grabbed his arm. The same arm with the bruises. Grabbed it hard enough that even on the grainy footage, I could see Dad wince. "You're taking up space in my house, Edward. Ruining my life. Do you understand that? James won't travel anymore. Won't go out. Everything is about you now." "I'm sorry," Dad whispered. "I didn't mean to—" "You didn't mean to what? Didn't mean to get sick? Didn't mean to become a burden?" She leaned in closer. "He spent $60,000 setting up your care. $60,000 we were supposed to use for our retirement, our trips, our future. But no, it all went to you." Dad tried to pull his arm away, but she held on. "Please, Sophia." "Please what? Please take care of you? Please be patient." "I've been patient for 3 months, Edward. I'm done being patient." She finally released his arm, but not before I saw her fingers dig in one more time. Dad pulled his arm to his chest, cradling it. "If you tell James about our little talks, I'll make sure he knows how much of a burden you really are. I'll tell him you're losing it, that you're confused, that you need to be in a home. Is that what you want? No. Then keep your mouth shut." She stood there a moment longer, looking down at him like he was something disgusting she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. Then she turned and left. I watched my father lie there in the darkness after she'd gone. Watched him curl into himself. Watched his shoulders shake, and I realized he was crying. Silently crying, alone in the dark. I had to stop the footage. Had to put my phone down because my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Dad was sitting in his chair, tears streaming down his face. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How long has this been happening?" "Since the 2nd week," he said. "Every few nights. Sometimes she just comes in and says things. Tells me what a burden I am, how I've ruined her life. Other times she gets physical. Not much. Just enough to hurt. To remind me. Why didn't you tell me?" He looked at me with such sadness. "You love her, James. You've been married for 42 years. I'm just an old man who doesn't have much time left anyway. I didn't want to destroy your marriage." "Dad." I knelt beside his chair. "You didn't destroy anything." "She did." I went to my bedroom. Sophia was due home in an hour. I packed a bag for her. Then I packed a bag for myself and Dad. I called my attorney, Bill Henderson, someone I'd known for 20 years. Told him I needed to see him immediately. Told him I had footage of elder abuse. He told me to come straight to his office and to call the police. I called the police. Filed a report. Showed them the footage. Watched their faces change from professional skepticism to disgust as they saw what I'd seen. They told me they'd send an officer to interview Dad, that Adult Protective Services would be involved, that this was serious. Then I waited. I sat in the living room with Dad beside me, both of us silent, until we heard Sophia's car in the driveway. She came in with shopping bags, smiling. "James, you're home early. I got those steaks you like for dinner tonight. Thought we could." She stopped when she saw our faces. Saw the packed bags by the door. "What's going on?" I held up my phone. "I want you to watch something." Her face went pale. "James, watch it." I played the footage. Watched her watch herself. Watched the color drain from her face. Watched her mouth open and close. When it ended, the silence was deafening. "It's not what it looks like," she finally said. "Really?" "Because it looks like you've been abusing my father, threatening him, hurting him. James, you don't understand. The stress, having him here. It's been so hard. So you terrorized a 72-year-old man with Parkinson's disease? I never meant I was just frustrated. You grabbed his arm hard enough to leave bruises. You withheld his medication. You told him he was a burden and threatened him to keep quiet." She started crying then. Real tears, streaming down her face. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. He changed everything. Our whole life revolves around him now. I felt like I was losing you. Losing us. So you chose to hurt him instead of talking to me. I didn't know what else to do. You had choices, Sophia. You could have told me you were struggling. We could have hired help. We could have found solutions. Instead, you abused a vulnerable old man who was too scared and too proud to tell me what was happening. Please." She reached for me, but I stepped back. "Please, James. We can fix this. I'll get therapy. I'll apologize to Edward. I'll do whatever it takes. Don't throw away 42 years." I looked at this woman I thought I'd known. This woman who'd shared my bed, my life, my dreams, and I didn't recognize her. "You threw it away the moment you decided my father was less important than your comfort. The police are coming, Sophia. I filed a report. Adult Protective Services will be involved. And my attorney is filing for divorce and a restraining order." Her face crumpled. "You're choosing him over me? I'm choosing basic human decency. Something you seem to have lost." The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers, professional and thorough. They interviewed Dad separately, took photos of his bruises, watched the footage. They told Sophia she needed to come with them to make a statement, told her that the district attorney would review the case for possible charges. As they led her out, she turned back to me one last time. "James, please, don't do this to us." "I didn't do this," I said quietly. "You did." The door closed behind her, and Dad and I were alone. He looked at me, this man who'd survived war and loss and disease, and he said, "I'm sorry, son." "Dad, you have nothing to be sorry for. I cost you your marriage." No, she cost herself her marriage when she chose cruelty over compassion. I moved us into a hotel that night, called Dad's doctor, explained the situation, made sure he was okay physically and emotionally. Over the next few days, Adult Protective Services interviewed us multiple times. The police told me the district attorney was considering charges for elder abuse and assault. My attorney filed for divorce and a restraining order, which was granted within 72 hours. Sophia tried to contact me. Emails, texts, calls. I didn't respond. Bill handled all communication. She hired her own attorney, claimed she'd been under stress, that she'd never actually hurt Dad, that the footage was taken out of context. But you can't take grabbing an old man's arm until it bruises out of context. You can't explain away the things she'd said. The divorce took 4 months to finalize. I got the house. She got her car and her retirement account. I didn't want anything from her, except for her to stay away from Dad and me. The restraining order was made permanent. The DA ended up offering her a plea deal, 3 years probation, mandatory therapy, and her name on the elder abuse registry. She took it, avoided jail time, but she'd never be able to work with elderly clients again. Not that it mattered. She'd lost her job anyway once word got out. Dad and I moved back into the townhouse together. I hired a daytime caregiver, a wonderful woman named Patricia who treats Dad with the kindness and respect he deserves. I cut back my hours at work, made sure I was home every evening to have dinner with him. Slowly, over the course of months, I watched him come back to himself, started telling stories again, started smiling. The fear left his eyes. One evening, about 6 months after everything happened, we were sitting on the back porch watching the sunset. Dad turned to me and said, "You know, I'm proud of you, right?" "For what?" "For doing the right thing. I know it wasn't easy, choosing me over her." "Dad, it was the easiest choice I've ever made. You're my father. You sacrificed everything for me growing up. You think I'd let someone hurt you and just stand by?" He reached over and squeezed my hand. His grip was weaker than it used to be, the Parkinson's progressing slowly but steadily. But it was warm and real, and full of love. "You're a good man, James. I learned from the best. I sleep well at night now, better than I have in years, because I know Dad is safe. I know he's cared for. I know he's loved. Sometimes I think about Sophia, about the woman I thought she was versus the woman she turned out to be. I don't know where she is now, don't particularly care. She made her choices. and she has to live with them. As for me, I made my choice too, and I'd make it again in a heartbeat. If you're listening to this and you have elderly parents or relatives in your care, please, I'm begging you, check on them. Not just their physical health, but their emotional well-being. Ask them if they feel safe. Really ask them, and then listen to their answer. Watch for changes in behavior. Watch for unexplained bruises. Watch for withdrawal and fear. Elder abuse doesn't always look like what you'd expect. Sometimes it's not strangers in nursing homes. Sometimes it's the people sleeping in the next room, the people you trust, the people you love. My father was too proud to tell me what was happening, too afraid of being a burden, too worried about ruining my marriage. And for 3 months, he suffered in silence because I wasn't paying attention. I was too busy, too trusting, too blind to see what was right in front of me. Don't be like I was. Don't wait until you find the bruises. Don't wait until you need a hidden camera to see the truth. Your parents spent years protecting you. Now it's your turn to protect them. They deserve safety. They deserve respect. They deserve dignity. And they deserve someone who will fight for them, even when it costs everything.